What's up guys, today we're going to go over heavy GL DPS and total damage output. I haven't made a video on these in quite a long time and they just got a buff this season, which was 10% to both bosses and majors to almost all of the GLs in the game minus the Parasite I believe. So in this video we'll be looking at both legendary 120s and 150s along with all of the exotics to see which ones are worth using and overall are GLs good or not. And I don't have the most legendary GLs in my vault. I've deleted a bunch over time because of how long they just haven't been relevant. But I definitely have enough to get the job done and see if they're good or not. So starting off with a 120, the base damage is right here. And this is all gonna be on Strike Boss. They do roughly like 5% less damage to bosses than majors. And on 120s, you can choose from something like Vorpal or even Frenzy. So looking at damage of Frenzy, it's gonna have the same issue that a lot of damage perks have on GLs, which is it only increases the explosion number and not the actual direct impact. It's only going to be increasing roughly like 2/3 of its total damage by that 15%, not all of its damage. So when it comes to something like Frenzy, which is generally a little bit higher than Vorpal, well, it turns out Vorpal is actually better and will be more consistent and you'll always have it. But the best perk you can get on a 120 by far is going to be Explosive Light, which is going to be, when you pick up Orb of Power, the next shot will do increased damage and have a bigger blast radius. And this will stack up to 6 times. So looking at damage on the Strike Boss with this, it's going to go up by quite a bit. Now hitting for these numbers right here. So overall, the base damage was 40,000, and Explosive Light took it up to 57.7 thousand, which is going to be a total of 43.2% increase, by far the best perk on a GL, but it's only for its first 6 shots. So looking at DPS of this 120, so 5 shots, reload and 5 shots once again. The 2 mags takes 6.2 seconds, which means DPS with Vorpal would be 106 over 1 mag, and then over 2 it falls off quite a bit to 71,000, but with Explosive Light the 1 mag is 138,000, which is obviously extremely high, then drops off to 81.4. This weapon also only holds 17 base reserves, which means somewhere in the neighborhood of 750,000 total damage depending on your perk. So with GLs, even though their like 1 mag is extremely high and their 2 mag doesn't really fall off that much, by the time you get through your entire reserves of the weapon, their DPS numbers are pretty on par with most things in the game over their entire reserves, and the total damage you're doing in that amount of time is extremely lower than a lot of other top options in the game, which is their main flaw. Outside of their first mag for burst DPS, they just simply won't kill a lot of things in the game due to how low their total damage output is. Taking a GL into a raid boss fight, yeah, over the first like 3 or 4 seconds, you'll be doing higher DPS than almost every other option in the game. But once you get through your 17 ammo, or if you have double reserve perks like 19 or 20, you know, the bosses still have a lot of health left, and now you're just out of ammo doing nothing. So that is like still like the major issue with GLs, is that they're mainly only good over their first 1 or 2 magazines in terms of DPS numbers, but the amount of damage you're doing in that amount of time is still just way too low to actually be useful in a lot of different situations. So now moving on to a 150, I have barely no 150s in my vault. I don't know what happened to them all, but just looking at this one, it has spike grenades and really no damage perk, but just looking at the base damage on the Strike Boss, it's going to be quite a bit lower than the 120, as you'll see right here, hitting for these 2 numbers now. And if we look at the perks on 150s, once again, you have things like Vorpal, but there is no Explosive Light. The perk on a 150, the Moon one, is Full Court, and that's going to be a 25% increase to the explosion number. So once again, not even increasing the entire damage of the GL. So overall, it's only going to be a 16% increase, and you have to be really far away to even proc the full damage. So once again, not too much better than Vorpal, and you have to be super far away. More often than not, just using something like Vorpal would be better. So looking at DPS of this 150, it's going to be quite a bit quicker than 120. 2 mags taking 5.4 seconds, which means DPS of 1 mag is a little bit higher than the 120 at 110. But then over 2, it falls off a lot down to 67.2 thousand. Also, this one has field prep on it, so it's gonna hold a little bit more than it should, but it's gonna be holding 21 ammo, which once again puts it in the neighborhood of 750,000. So once again, the first mag DPS is extremely high, but the amount of damage you're actually doing is extremely low, and as you reload more and more and get through the entire reserves, the DPS number is not even that good. So maybe there's an exotic in the game that will be worth using. So first look at the Prospector, look at damage on the Strike Boss. It's gonna hit for 2 numbers like usual, then like a little bit of like a burn number. And if we look at the rate of fire of the weapon, so this one's have an 8 mag and have full auto built in. The 2 mags is gonna be pretty quick at 7.275 seconds. And this weapon also holds 23 base reserves. So looking at DPS and damage output, it's gonna be 100k for 1 mag over 2 mag. Not that big of a fall off to 71. Then once again 750,000 for its total damage output. So kind of in line with the legendary GLs and nothing really special. We also have the colony, which I'll just save your time in the video. Just don't use this scene. It tracks, which is kind of cool for PvP. Kind of, but in PV it does like no damage and it's just not worth using. We also have the Anarchy, which I have talked a lot about throughout the years. Adds roughly 20k DPS to any combo and obviously a lot of damage output. Not as good as it used to be, but still definitely good. And finally, last one will be the Parasite. It is one of the coolest weapons in the game in my opinion. I absolutely love this thing when it came out. So looking at its numbers, first without any stacks at all, only strike boss. It's gonna hit for these 2 numbers, which add up to roughly 100k. Then with times 20 max stacks, it's gonna do a lot of damage, hitting for those 2 numbers, which was 301,000, which is exactly 3x damage or a 200% increase. And finally, looking at the rate of fire, so more often than not, you're just gonna be using this for the first shot, that crazy burst. But over 2 and 4 shots, it's still not that bad, as you'll see. This weapon also holds 7 total ammo with no reserves, which means DPS over 2 shots is still almost 200k, then over 4, still 97k, and total damage output of 905. So by far the best numbers we've seen in this video. So it seems like the Parasite is your best choice if you want to use a heavy GL for a boss fight. But on their own, most of them don't have that great of numbers. Their first mag number is obviously extremely high. But for most things in the game, you know, the first mag won't kill it unless it's like a strike boss or like a mini boss along the way. And most boss fights, you're gonna have to be using at least 2 mags, if not the entire reserves. And over that, their numbers drop a lot and become more in line with most things in the game. And their total damage output is lacking compared to basically every other option. So it's really hard to recommend using these things still. And overall, they're definitely just not worth the slot compared to a linear or even a rocket. And yeah, it's really hard to kind of suggest what they need to do to make these things balanced. Their identity is kind of like the burst DPS weapons, but most like longer boss fights in the game obviously don't need that. They need sustained DPS. And if you look at the good options for that, for example linears or rockets, they're also like not that bad at burst DPS, so it's like just use that all the time instead, because they kind of do both really well. So it's just kind of hard to balance these things, to be honest. So yeah, let me know what you think about GLs down below, and I think that's gonna be it for the commentary. Like usual, thanks for watching, catch you guys next time.
A mighty cabal challenge.